For decades, the world believed Michael Jackson had everything. He was the biggest entertainer on earth, the king of pop, a global icon whose music crossed every border, every language, and every generation. He sold hundreds of millions of records, performed before sold-out stadiums across the globe, owned one of the most valuable music catalogs in history, and lived inside a place that looked more like a fairy tale than a private home. From the outside, his life appeared limitless. Unlimited fame, unlimited influence, unlimited wealth. But behind the headlines, a very different story was quietly unfolding. One hidden behind luxury, success, and one of the greatest careers the entertainment industry had ever seen. When Michael Jackson died on June 25th, 2009, the world came to a standstill. Millions of fans gathered outside hospitals and memorials. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Radio stations played his music around the clock for days. It seemed as though the entire planet was mourning together, yet while the public remembered the legend, lawyers and financial experts began uncovering a reality that shocked almost everyone. The man who had earned hundreds of millions of dollars throughout his lifetime, the artist whose albums shattered records, the performer whose name became synonymous with pop music, had died carrying more than $500 million in debt. It sounded impossible. How could someone so successful, someone who generated extraordinary wealth for decades, end up owing so much money? Where had it all gone? The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't one bad investment, one failed tour, or one unfortunate decision. Instead, it was the result of years of extraordinary success, followed by equally extraordinary spending, lavish purchases, massive loans, an extravagant lifestyle, and financial decisions that slowly became impossible to sustain. Yet this isn't only the story of financial collapse, because something even more remarkable happened after Michael Jackson's death. Instead of disappearing beneath mountains of debt, his estate accomplished what many financial experts believed couldn't be done within a few short years. The same estate that had stood on the edge of bankruptcy became one of the most valuable entertainment empires in history. Billions of dollars flowed back into a legacy that once appeared destined for disaster. It became one of the greatest financial turnarounds the music business has ever witnessed. But to understand how that happened, we first have to travel back to where Michael Jackson's story truly began, long before the sold-out concerts, before the platinum records, shunned before Neverland, and long before the financial crisis that nearly erased everything. Back to a small steel town where one gifted little boy changed his family's future forever, without realizing the enormous price that extraordinary success would eventually demand. Long before Michael Jackson became the most recognizable entertainer on the planet, he was simply a young boy growing up in Gary, Indiana. During the 1960s, Gary was known for its steel mills, not for producing global music legends. Life was difficult for many families, and the Jacksons were no exception. 9 family members shared a modest home where money was scarce and every dollar mattered. Yet inside those small walls, something extraordinary was beginning to take shape. Michael's father, Joseph Jackson, believed his children had talent. More importantly, he believed talent meant nothing without discipline. Practice became part of everyday life. Mistakes weren't accepted. Perfection was expected. The rehearsals were demanding, often lasting for hours, but they forged a work ethic that would stay with Michael for the rest of his life. Among all the brothers, one child quickly stood apart. Even at 6 years old, Michael possessed something impossible to teach. His voice carried remarkable emotion. His rhythm felt effortless. And when he stepped onto a stage, people couldn't take their eyes off him. There was a confidence beyond his years, a natural ability to command attention that audiences instantly recognized. It didn't matter whether he was performing in a local talent show or a neighborhood club. The reaction was always the same. People knew they were witnessing someone special. That extraordinary gift soon carried the Jackson family far beyond Indiana. In 1969, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records. It was a turning point that changed everything. Almost overnight, the group became one of the biggest acts in America. Their first 4 singles all reached #1 on the Billboard charts, an achievement few artists have ever matched. At just 10 years old, Michael had become the face of one of the hottest groups in music. Television appearances became routine, concert halls filled with screaming fans. Every performance brought even greater success. To the public, it looked like a dream. But behind the excitement, Michael's childhood was disappearing. While other children spent afternoons playing with friends, he was recording in studios, traveling across the country, performing night after night. His life revolved around schedules, rehearsals, and constant expectations. Fame arrived long before he had the chance to experience an ordinary childhood. Those early years shaped more than his career. They shaped his personality. The applause became familiar. The spotlight became normal. And somewhere along the way, Michael developed an overwhelming desire to make every audience happy. Every performance had to be better than the last. Every song had to exceed expectations. That relentless pursuit of perfection would eventually transform him into the greatest entertainer of his generation, but it would also create pressures few people could truly understand. As the 1970s came to an end, Michael was no longer satisfied with simply being the lead singer of a successful group. He wanted something bigger, something the music industry had never seen before. He was preparing for the project that would change popular music forever, an album that wouldn't just make history, it would redefine it, and with that success would come more money than almost anyone could imagine. By the early 1980s, Michael Jackson was already a major star, but he wasn't satisfied with being successful. He wanted to create something the world had never experienced before. That opportunity arrived in November 1982, with the release of Thriller. No one, not the record label, not the music industry, not even Michael himself could have predicted what would happen next. Thriller wasn't simply another hit album. It became a cultural phenomenon. Song after song climbed the charts. The album remained popular year after year. Its music videos changed the way artists promoted their work, transforming short promotional clips into cinematic productions that audiences couldn't wait to watch. Suddenly, Michael Jackson wasn't just dominating music, he was redefining entertainment itself. His performances became global events. His image appeared everywhere: television, magazines, billboards, merchandise. Wherever people looked, Michael Jackson was there. The success was unlike anything the music business had seen before. As his popularity exploded, so did his income. Concert tours generated extraordinary revenue. Album sales reached historic levels. Licensing agreements, merchandise, and endorsements added millions more to his fortune. At the peak of his career, Michael was earning tens of millions of dollars every year. By any measure, he had become one of the wealthiest entertainers in the world. For most people, that kind of financial success would represent lifelong security. But for Michael, it became the beginning of a very different story. Because as his fortune grew, so did his spending. Michael didn't think like an ordinary millionaire. He dreamed on an extraordinary scale. If he imagined something, he wanted to build it. If he admired something, he wanted to own it. Money wasn't something he carefully protected. It was something he used to turn imagination into reality. Friends and associates often described his generosity as limitless. He donated millions to charities around the world. He bought expensive gifts without hesitation. He helped people financially whenever he believed they were in need. Those acts reflected genuine kindness, but they also revealed a pattern. Spending became almost effortless. The larger his fortune became, the easier it was to believe the money would never stop coming. At the same time, his professional ambitions continued growing. Every album had to be bigger. Every concert had to surpass the previous one. Every project demanded more elaborate productions, larger budgets, and greater investment. Success created even greater expectations, and meeting those expectations required enormous amounts of money. For years, it didn't seem like a problem. The income continued flowing. Record-breaking tours filled stadiums around the world. Albums sold by the millions. New business opportunities appeared constantly. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But hidden beneath the extraordinary success, a dangerous habit had quietly taken hold. Michael wasn't simply spending what he earned, he was building a lifestyle that required enormous amounts of money just to maintain. As long as the income continued, few people questioned it, but fortunes can change, markets shift, tours end, album sales slow, and when that happens, even extraordinary wealth can begin disappearing much faster than anyone expects. For Michael Jackson, that turning point was approaching. And it would begin with a dream unlike anything the world had ever seen, a dream called Neverland. As Michael Jackson's fortune continued to grow, so did his dreams. Unlike most celebrities, though he wasn't searching for another mansion or another luxury vacation home, he wanted to create an entirely different world, a place where imagination replaced reality, a place where childhood never had to end. That dream became Neverland Ranch, located in California's Santa Ynez Valley. The property stretched across nearly 2,700 acres. But calling it a ranch hardly described what it became. Neverland was more like a private amusement park than a home. There were carnival rides, a Ferris wheel, a carousel, a miniature train that traveled across the property, movie theaters, beautiful gardens, guest houses, and even a private zoo filled with exotic animals: elephants, giraffes, tigers, lions, animals most people would only ever see inside a zoo were now part of Michael Jackson's backyard. To visitors, Neverland looked magical. Children who arrived there often described it as something out of a fairy tale. For Michael, it represented something much deeper. It was a place where he could escape the pressures of fame, A world built around the childhood he often said he never truly experienced. But dreams of that size come with extraordinary costs. Building Neverland required millions of dollars. Keeping it running required even more. The rides had to be maintained. The animals needed constant care. The gardens demanded full-time attention. Security operated around the clock. Maintenance crews worked every day. A large staff kept the property functioning whether Michael was home or traveling across the world. The expenses never stopped. Experts later estimated that maintaining Neverland alone cost tens of millions of dollars over the years. And that was only one part of Michael's lifestyle. His spending extended far beyond the ranch. He collected fine art, purchased rare antiques, commissioned custom furniture from Europe, visited luxury stores, and often bought whatever caught his attention without asking the price. Jewelry, paintings, decorative pieces, entire collections. If something inspired him, he bought it. Friends and business associates frequently described shopping trips unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Michael didn't think in terms of budgets, he thought in terms of possibilities. Money became a tool for bringing ideas to life. He was equally generous with other people. He donated millions to charitable organizations, supported hospitals, helped children around the world, and often gave expensive gifts to friends, employees, and even people he had only recently met. His generosity became one of his defining characteristics, but financially, it created a dangerous pattern. Money flowed out almost as quickly as it came in. At first, there was little reason for concern. His albums continued breaking records. His concerts sold out across the globe. New business opportunities generated millions every year. The income seemed endless, but beneath that extraordinary success, a financial imbalance was quietly developing. The lifestyle Michael had created required an astonishing amount of money simply to continue existing. If the income ever slowed, the expenses would remain exactly the same. And that day was getting closer than anyone realized, because even while Michael was spending at unprecedented levels, he was also preparing to make one of the smartest business decisions of his entire life. A decision that would eventually become both his greatest financial triumph and one of the reasons he borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars. Even as Michael Jackson's spending continued to grow, he proved that he wasn't simply an entertainer, he could also think like a businessman. And in the mid-1980s, he made a decision that would eventually become one of the greatest investments in music history. The opportunity came through music publishing. Unlike record sales or concert tickets, publishing rights generate income every time a song is played, performed, streamed, licensed, or used in a film or commercial. Michael understood that owning songs could be even more valuable than recording them. In 1985, he purchased the ATV music publishing catalog for approximately $47.5 million. It was an enormous investment. Many people believed he had overpaid, but Michael saw something others didn't. The catalog included publishing rights to more than 250 songs by the Beatles, along with hundreds of other valuable compositions. It wasn't simply a collection of music, it was an asset capable of producing income for decades. As the years passed, its value continued climbing. The decision that once seemed risky began looking brilliant. Industry experts eventually valued the catalog at well over $1 billion. It became one of the most valuable assets Michael Jackson would ever own. For a time, everything appeared to be working perfectly. His music career remained successful. The publishing catalog continued increasing in value, and his worldwide popularity showed few signs of slowing. But there was one problem. Owning an incredibly valuable asset doesn't always mean having cash available. Michael's lifestyle still required enormous amounts of money. Neverland continued costing millions to operate. His travel, his staff, his collections, his generosity. The spending never slowed. Eventually, he found himself facing a difficult financial reality. Much of his wealth existed on paper, but many of his daily expenses required immediate cash. To solve that problem, Michael turned to borrowing. He used his ownership interest in the publishing catalog as collateral for major loans. At first, the strategy appeared reasonable. The catalog was worth an extraordinary amount. Borrowing against it allowed him to continue funding his lifestyle without selling the asset itself. But borrowing has consequences. Loans must eventually be repaid. Interest continues accumulating every single day. And as Michael's expenses remained high, the borrowing continued. Millions became tens of millions. Tens of millions became hundreds of millions. Each new loan provided temporary relief. But it also increased the financial pressure waiting in the future. Then another challenge appeared. During the 1990s, Michael's career entered a far more difficult chapter. Public controversies, legal battles, and intense media attention affected both his reputation and his business relationships. The steady flow of income that had once seemed endless began slowing. Yet his expenses remained almost exactly the same. The financial equation was changing. Income was becoming less predictable. Debt was becoming larger. Interest payments kept growing. The asset that had once represented financial security was now supporting an increasingly fragile financial structure. Ironically, the same publishing catalog that helped Michael borrow hundreds of millions of dollars would one day become the very asset that saved his estate. But Michael would never live to see that happen, because by the early 2000s, the financial pressure had become impossible to ignore, and the crisis that had been quietly building for years was finally about to reach its breaking point. By the early 2000s, the financial empire Michael Jackson had spent decades building was beginning to crack. To the public, he was still one of the most recognizable people on earth. His name remained larger than life. His music continued selling around the world, and his influence on popular culture showed no signs of fading. But behind closed doors, his financial situation had become increasingly difficult. The enormous income that had once flowed from record sales and worldwide tours was no longer arriving at the same pace. New albums were released less frequently. Major tours became increasingly rare. Meanwhile, the expenses never stopped. Neverland Ranch still required millions of dollars each year just to operate. Employees had to be paid. Security remained in place. The property itself demanded constant maintenance. On top of that, Michael continued carrying substantial loans that required regular interest payments. The pressure continued growing. As debts increased, financial institutions began watching his situation more closely. Some loans were refinanced, others were extended, but each new agreement only postponed the larger problem. Michael needed significant new income. Without it, the numbers simply didn't work. Adding to the pressure were years of legal battles and intense public scrutiny. Defending himself in court required enormous legal expenses. Business opportunities became more complicated. Corporate partnerships grew more cautious. Although many fans remained loyal, the constant headlines affected his financial stability. By the middle of the decade, reports suggested that Michael owed hundreds of millions of dollars. Some estimates placed his total obligations at well over $400 million. Others believed the figure was even higher. Much of his wealth remained tied to valuable assets, especially his share of the music publishing catalog. But valuable assets don't automatically solve cash flow problems. Without enough available money, even someone with extraordinary holdings can face serious financial difficulty. The situation became so severe that Neverland itself could no longer escape the crisis. The property that had once symbolized imagination and childhood wonder now represented one of Michael's greatest financial burdens. Eventually, he left Neverland and spent much of his later life living outside the ranch. It marked the end of an era. The dream he had built over decades was quietly slipping away. Yet despite the financial struggles, Michael never stopped believing he could rebuild. In 2009, a remarkable opportunity appeared. He announced, "This is it," a series of comeback concerts scheduled to take place in London. The announcement created worldwide excitement. Tickets disappeared almost immediately. Demand became so overwhelming that additional performances were added. Fans believed they were about to witness one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. For Michael, the concerts represented far more than another tour. They were an opportunity to restore his finances, repay debts, and begin a new chapter. Rehearsals were already underway. Production crews worked around the clock. Musicians, dancers, stage designers. Everyone was preparing for what promised to be an unforgettable event, but before opening night could arrive, everything changed. On June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson died unexpectedly. The comeback the world had been waiting for never happened. Instead, his family, his fans, and the financial experts responsible for untangling his estate were left facing a question no one had expected. Just how much debt had the king of pop actually left behind? By the summer of 2009, it seemed Michael Jackson was ready for one final chapter. After years away from the concert stage, he was preparing for a comeback unlike anything the music industry had ever seen. The tour was called This Is It. Originally announced as a limited series of performances at London's O2 Arena, the demand was overwhelming. Tickets sold out within hours. Additional shows were added almost immediately. Fans from every continent made travel plans, hotels filled with reservations, airlines reported increased bookings. The excitement surrounding Michael Jackson's return was unlike anything seen in years. Behind the scenes, rehearsals were already underway. Michael spent long hours perfecting every detail, the choreography, the music, the lighting, the visual effects. Nothing was left to chance. Even after decades in the spotlight, he still expected perfection from himself. Those who attended the rehearsals later described an artist fully committed to delivering another unforgettable performance. Despite the enormous pressure, Michael appeared determined to prove he could still captivate audiences around the world. For him, This as it wasn't simply another concert series, it represented a fresh beginning. The tour promised hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. It offered an opportunity to stabilize his finances, to reduce his growing debts, and to remind the world why he had earned the title of the King of Pop. Everything seemed to be moving toward that moment. Then, on the afternoon of June 25th, 2009, the world received news no one expected. Michael Jackson had suffered cardiac arrest at his rented home in Los Angeles. Emergency responders arrived quickly. He was transported to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. Doctors worked to save his life, but despite every effort, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at the age of 50. Within minutes, news organizations around the world interrupted regular programming. Television networks switched to live coverage. Radio stations abandoned scheduled broadcasts. Websites struggled under the weight of millions of visitors searching for information. Outside hospitals, fans gathered in shock. Some stood silently, others cried openly. Many simply couldn't believe the news. It felt impossible. Only days earlier, the world had been counting down to his return. Now, they were mourning his loss. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. Vigils appeared in cities across the globe. Flowers covered the stars along the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Fans sang his songs outside recording studios and public memorials. Record stores reported extraordinary demand for his albums. Streaming numbers surged. Television specials revisited every chapter of his remarkable career. For a brief moment, the world seemed united by music. Yet while millions remembered the artist, another story was unfolding behind closed doors. Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, and estate administrators began examining the complex financial situation Michael had left behind. What they discovered surprised even experienced professionals. The public believed Michael Jackson had died one of the richest entertainers in history. The reality was far more complicated. Beneath the extraordinary success, behind the worldwide fame, lay a financial structure burdened by enormous loans and mounting obligations. As documents were reviewed, one shocking figure kept appearing. Michael Jackson's debts were estimated at more than $500 million. For many observers, the number seemed almost impossible to understand. How could someone whose career had generated billions leave behind liabilities of that size? It was a question that would soon dominate conversations throughout the entertainment industry, and the answer would become one of the most remarkable financial stories in modern music history. When Michael Jackson died, the world mourned the loss of a music legend, but behind the scenes, another challenge had just begun: the responsibility of untangling one of the most complicated celebrity estates in history. Lawyers, financial advisors, accountants, and court-appointed representatives began examining thousands of pages of financial records. What they found surprised almost everyone. Michael Jackson had not died with unlimited wealth. He had died carrying enormous financial obligations. Estimates suggested that his total debts exceeded $500 million. It was a staggering number, especially for someone whose career had generated billions in revenue over 4 decades. But those debts hadn't appeared overnight. They had accumulated slowly over many years. Large bank loans, interest payments, property expenses, legal fees, business obligations, personal spending. Together, they created a financial burden unlike anything most people had imagined. Some of the largest loans were secured against Michael's most valuable assets: his ownership interest in the famous music publishing catalog. Those rights continued generating income every day. Every time a song was played on the radio, licensed for a film, used in a commercial, or purchased by a new listener, the catalog earned money. It remained one of the most valuable collections of music rights in the world, but until those debts were managed, even an asset of that size couldn't fully solve the estate's immediate problems. The estate also faced ongoing operating expenses. Employees still needed to be paid. Business agreements had to be honored. Taxes had to be addressed. Outstanding contracts required careful review. Every financial decision carried enormous consequences. For a moment, some observers questioned whether valuable assets might have to be sold simply to satisfy creditors. It appeared possible that pieces of Michael Jackson's legacy could disappear forever. But the people placed in charge of the estate saw another possibility. Instead of rushing to sell valuable assets, they chose a different strategy: protect the catalog, reduce unnecessary expenses, and rebuild the estate patiently. It was an ambitious plan. There were no guarantees it would succeed. The debt was massive. Public attention remained intense. Every financial decision attracted headlines. Yet the estate's administrators believed Michael Jackson's greatest asset wasn't a building, or a collection of artwork, or even Neverland Ranch. It was his music. His recordings continued reaching millions of listeners around the world. Classic albums still sold. Streaming platforms introduced his songs to entirely new generations. Television specials, documentaries, and tribute performances kept his legacy alive, even after his death. Michael Jackson remained one of the most recognizable artists on earth. That recognition created opportunity. The estate carefully negotiated new licensing agreements, expanded business partnerships, and found responsible ways to preserve the value of Michael's intellectual property rather than selling it too quickly. It was a long-term approach, one based on patience instead of panic. Slowly, the financial picture began changing, revenue continued growing, debt started shrinking, assets increased in value. The same estate that once appeared overwhelmed by financial obligations was beginning to stabilize. And what happened next? Few people could have predicted, because over the following years, Michael Jackson's estate would accomplish one of the greatest financial recoveries the entertainment industry had ever witnessed. A comeback? Not on a concert stage, but on a balance sheet. When the first financial reports emerged after Michael Jackson's death, many people believed his estate faced an impossible challenge. More than $500 million in reported debt, countless legal obligations, ongoing business expenses, and a public legacy that required careful protection. To many observers, it looked like financial disaster. But behind the scenes, a very different strategy was taking shape. Rather than selling Michael Jackson's most valuable assets to satisfy creditors immediately, the estate chose patience. Its administrators understood something many people overlooked. Michael Jackson's greatest asset wasn't a house, it wasn't Neverland Ranch, and it wasn't a collection of expensive artwork, it was his music. His songs continued reaching millions of people every day. Radio stations still played his biggest hits. Streaming services introduced his catalog to younger audiences. Television specials, documentaries, and tribute performances kept his name in front of the public. Unlike many physical assets, music doesn't wear out. If managed carefully, its value can continue growing for generations. The estate focused on protecting that value. Existing business agreements were reviewed. Outstanding debts were gradually restructured and reduced. New licensing opportunities were carefully negotiated. Every decision centered on one goal: preserve Michael Jackson's legacy while rebuilding the estate's financial strength. Then came one of the most successful projects in the estate's history, the documentary concert film This Is It. Built from rehearsal footage originally recorded for Michael's planned London comeback, the film offered audiences a rare look behind the scenes during his final weeks of preparation. Released only months after his death, and it became a major worldwide success. Millions of fans who never had the chance to see the concerts experienced what might have been. The project generated substantial revenue, while celebrating Michael's extraordinary commitment to performance. It became the first major step in rebuilding the estate. Other opportunities soon followed. Classic albums were reissued. New collections introduced Michael's music to another generation. Licensing agreements expanded across television, film, and advertising. His recordings continued producing income year after year. Perhaps most importantly, the estate protected its most valuable investment, the music publishing assets that had once been used to secure enormous loans. Instead of losing those rights during the financial crisis, they remained part of a long-term strategy that continued creating value. Slowly, the numbers began changing. Debt declined, revenue increased, assets appreciated. Financial experts who had once questioned whether the estate could recover began recognizing something remarkable. One of the most financially troubled celebrity estates in history had become one of its greatest success stories. Over the years, the estate generated billions of dollars through careful management, licensing, and the enduring popularity of Michael Jackson's music. The transformation was extraordinary. A legacy once overshadowed by debt had become stronger than ever. Ironically, the financial recovery Michael had hoped to achieve during his lifetime was accomplished only after his death. The comeback the world expected to see on stage instead happened in boardrooms, recording studios, and business negotiations. By preserving the value of his life's work, the estate accomplished something few believed possible. It turned overwhelming debt into one of the most valuable entertainment legacies ever created. And that remarkable turnaround left one final question. What does Michael Jackson's financial journey teach us about fame, success, and the true value of a lasting legacy? Years after Michael Jackson's passing, the financial story surrounding his legacy had completely changed. What once appeared to be one of the most troubled celebrity estates in history had become one of its greatest financial success stories. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It wasn't the result of one extraordinary business deal or one lucky investment. It came from years of careful planning, patient decision-making, and a clear understanding of what Michael Jackson had truly left behind. Because despite the enormous debt, his greatest asset had never disappeared. His music, every day, somewhere in the world. A Michael Jackson song continued to play on the radio, through streaming services, in movies, television shows, commercials, sporting events, and family celebrations. His recordings never stopped reaching new audiences. Every generation discovered something different in his work. Some admired the unforgettable melodies. Others were inspired by his groundbreaking performances. Many simply connected with music that had become part of popular culture itself. That continuing popularity became the foundation of the estate's remarkable recovery. Instead of focusing on short-term solutions, the estate focused on protecting Michael's creative legacy. His recordings, his publishing rights, his image, his performances. Each decision was made with the future in mind. As the years passed, the results became impossible to ignore. Financial reports showed extraordinary growth. Business partnerships expanded. Licensing agreements generated substantial revenue. New projects introduced Michael's work to millions of younger listeners who had never seen him perform live. The estate gradually paid down enormous debts, while preserving the assets that continued increasing in value. Eventually, industry analysts estimated that Michael Jackson's estate had generated well over $2 billion since his death, a figure few people could have imagined during the financial uncertainty of 2009. It became one of the most successful entertainment estates ever managed. The irony is impossible to ignore. During his lifetime, Michael often struggled to balance extraordinary success with extraordinary spending. He earned fortunes, yet frequently lived under enormous financial pressure. After his passing, the careful management of the very assets he created produced the financial stability he had long searched for. His story offers a lesson that extends far beyond music. Success is not measured only by how much money someone earns. It also depends on how that success is preserved. Michael Jackson built one of the most extraordinary careers in entertainment history. His talent changed music forever. His performances influenced generations of artists. And even after his final curtain call, his work continued creating opportunities that few performers have ever matched. Today, his legacy is measured by far more than financial numbers. It lives through timeless songs, historic performances, groundbreaking music videos, and millions of fans spread across every continent. His influence continues to shape popular culture decades after he first stepped onto a stage. Perhaps that is the greatest ending this story could have. A man who once appeared overwhelmed by debt ultimately left behind a legacy worth billions, not because of the homes he owned or the possessions he collected, but because of the art he created. In the end, Michael Jackson's greatest investment was never Neverland. It was never real estate. It was never luxury. It was his imagination, his creativity, his music. Those gifts proved more valuable than any material possession. They survived every financial setback, every controversy, every passing year, and they continue inspiring the world today. That is why the King of Pop's story is remembered not as one of bankruptcy, but as one of resilience. Not as the story of a fortune that disappeared, but as the story of a legacy that became even greater with time. Because true legends leave behind more than wealth. They leave behind something far more valuable. A legacy that continues to inspire long after the music fades.